I am 26 years old, a woman who believed she had a stable life. My husband, Mark, who is 28, and I had been married for 3 years. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were a team. I thought we were building a future together. That future included a house, one we were saving for diligently. Most of the savings, if I am being honest, came from my own inheritance, a sum my grandmother had left me with a specific instruction to use it for a home. I treasured that money, not just for its value, but for the love it represented. It was a tangible piece of my grandmother's belief in me. Mark knew this. He knew how much that down payment fund meant. It was our shared dream, but the foundation of it was my family's legacy.
His family was different from mine.
My parents were quiet, supportive people who believed in letting their children find their own way. Mark's mother, Carol, and his sister, Susan, were louder. They were a tight unit, and I often felt like an outsider looking in. They had a way of speaking in inside jokes and shared histories that left no room for me. Carol, in particular, had a knack for making me feel small. Her compliments were always double-edged, her praise for Mark always framed in a way that subtly diminished my contributions to our life. She would praise the meals I cooked, but then mention how Mark must miss her home cooking. She would admire our apartment, but then sigh about how small it was compared to the house Mark grew up in. It was a constant, low-level campaign to remind me that I was the addition, the temporary fixture in their permanent family structure. The occasion was Carol and her husband's 40th wedding anniversary. It was a big deal, and the planning had been going on for months. Carol wanted a lavish dinner at a restaurant I knew we could not afford. It was a place with white tablecloths and a wine list that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. Mark had come to me a few weeks prior, his face etched with worry. He sat me down at our small kitchen table, his hands clasped together. "Laura, we need to talk about the dinner," he had said. His voice was low, and he would not meet my eyes. "I know it's expensive, Mark. We can figure something out," I had replied, trying to be supportive. I assumed he was going to suggest a more reasonable venue. "That's the thing. My mom has her heart set on the Grandview," he said, naming the restaurant. "She's already told all her friends. It would crush her to change it now." I remember feeling a familiar prickle of annoyance. Carol's feelings always seemed to take precedence over our financial reality. I took a deep breath, determined to be the reasonable one. I was the peacemaker in our relationship, the one who smoothed over the rough edges of his family's demands. It was a role I had slipped into without realizing it, and one I was growing tired of. "Okay," I said slowly. "So what's the plan? How are we going to pay for it?" He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "My dad's pension took a hit this year. They can't cover it all. Susan is helping, but she has her own kids to worry about. We were hoping you could help." The way he said "you" instead of "we" did not escape me. He was not asking us to contribute from our joint account. He was asking me to contribute. He was looking at my inheritance. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. That money was for our house. It was for our future. It was not for a one-night party to impress Carol's friends. "Mark, you know what that money is for," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's for the down payment." We agreed. I know," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His touch felt clammy. "But this is a once-in-a-lifetime event for them. 40 years. It's important. It would mean so much to my mom. She sees that money just sitting in your account, and she thinks you don't see us as real family." The manipulation was so blatant, it almost took my breath away. He was using his mother's perceived feelings to guilt me into giving up my security, my grandmother's legacy. He was making me the villain, the ungenerous daughter-in-law who was hoarding her wealth while his good, hard-working parents struggled. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. I loved him, and I wanted to keep the peace. I wanted his family to accept me, to finally see me as one of them. It was a foolish hope, but it was a powerful one. "How much?" I asked, my voice flat. He named a number. It was not a small amount. It was enough to set back our house savings by at least 6 months. I hesitated, the sensible part of my brain screaming at me to say no. This was a boundary. This was a test. But the part of me that craved his approval, that craved his family's acceptance, won out. Okay, I whispered. I can contribute that much. But Mark, this is it. After this, that savings account is not to be touched. It is for the house, and only the house. Do you understand? Of course, he said, his face breaking into a relieved smile. He squeezed my hand. Thank you, Laura. You have no idea what this means to me.
To them.
My mom is going to be so happy. I did not feel happy. I felt like I had just been robbed, but I had handed the thief the key to the vault. I transferred the agreed-upon amount from my savings into our joint account, the account from which the restaurant deposit was supposed to be paid. I felt a piece of my dream slip away with the click of the mouse. But I told myself it was for a good cause. It was for family. It was for peace. I had no idea how wrong I was. The night of the dinner arrived. I spent extra time getting ready. I chose a simple, elegant blue dress, one Mark had always said he liked. I did my hair and makeup carefully. I wanted to look the part. I wanted to feel like I belonged. I wanted Carol to see me and think, not of my money, but of me as her son's wife. I bought a thoughtful card and a beautiful orchid for them, a symbol of longevity and love. I was trying so hard. I was playing by the rules of a game I did not fully understand. I drove to the restaurant alone because Mark had left earlier in the day. He said he needed to go help his father with some last-minute arrangements. He promised to meet me there. He told me the reservation was at 7 o'clock. I arrived at 5 minutes to 7, my stomach fluttering with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. I hoped the night would be a turning point, a moment where my contribution would be acknowledged, and I would finally be welcomed into the inner circle. The restaurant was even more opulent than I had imagined. A man in a uniform opened the door for me. The lobby was hushed, filled with the quiet clinking of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation. I saw a sign for the Henderson anniversary party, pointing toward a private dining room at the back. I walked toward it, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. As I approached the entrance to the room, I saw Mark standing just outside the door, talking to the host. He was wearing a new suit, one I had not seen before. He looked handsome, but his posture was tense. He saw me approaching, and his face changed. The smile he had been giving the host vanished. It was replaced by a look of alarm, of pure, unadulterated panic. He quickly said something to the host, and then walked toward me, his steps fast and urgent. He was trying to intercept me before I reached the door.
My heart began to pound.
Something was wrong. This was not the welcome I had expected. Laura, he said, his voice a harsh whisper. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. What are you doing here? I stared at him, confused. What do you mean? It's your parents' anniversary dinner. It's 7 o'clock. He looked over his shoulder, back toward the private room. I could hear the sound of laughter from inside. I could hear Carol's distinctive, loud laugh. They were all in there. They had started without me. You can't be here, he said, his voice dropping even lower. He started to steer me away from the door, back toward the main lobby. His grip on my arm was tight, almost painful. Mark, what is going on? I asked, trying to pull my arm away. You're hurting me. Why can't I be here? Just listen to me, he hissed, his eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching us. Things have changed. It's a family-only thing now. A smaller group. Family only? I repeated, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. Mark, I am your family. I am your wife. We talked about this for weeks. I helped pay for this. The moment I mentioned the money, his face hardened. The panic was replaced by a cold, dismissive anger. It was a look I had seen him give to strangers, to people he considered beneath him. I had never seen him directed at me. This is not the time or the place to discuss that, he said, his voice sharp. You are making a scene. You need to leave. A scene? I whispered, my voice trembling. I looked past him, toward the doorway of the private room. Just for a second, I saw his mother, Carol, and his sister, Susan, standing there. They were watching us. They were not smiling. They looked at me with expressions of pure disdain, as if I were a piece of dirt someone had tracked into their pristine party. Then, they turned their backs and walked back into the room, disappearing from view. They had seen. They had seen my husband turning me away, and they had done nothing. They had approved. That was the moment I understood. This was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. This was a message. Mark's voice cut through my shock. "You're not invited, Laura," he said, his words clear and cruel. He finally let go of my arm, as if touching me was now distasteful to him. "Go away." He did not wait for my response. He turned his back on me, straightened his new suit jacket, and walked into the private dining room. He disappeared behind the polished wooden door, leaving me standing alone in the cold, marble lobby. The sound of his family's laughter drifted out from behind the closed door, mocking me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the orchid and the card still clutched in my hand. My blue dress felt like a costume for a play I had not been cast in. I was the fool. I was the outsider. And I had paid for the privilege of my own public humiliation. The ride home was a blur. I do not remember the traffic or the route I took. I just remember the feeling of cold, hard shock settling deep in my bones. It was a physical sensation, a weight in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. Mark's panicked face. The cruel set of his jaw. The words, "You're not invited. Go away," and the image of Carol and Susan, watching with cold satisfaction before turning their backs on me. When I got back to our apartment, the silence was deafening. The space we had shared, the home I thought we were building, felt alien and hostile. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture we had picked out together. Every object seemed to mock me. The sofa, where we had cuddled and watched movies. The kitchen table where he had begged me for money. My money. The money from my grandmother, which I had given him to secure my place in a family that had just thrown me out on the street. I sat down on the edge of our bed, the beautiful card and the now slightly wilting orchid still in my hands. I dropped them on the floor. The anger had not come yet. It was still just a deep, hollow ache of betrayal.
Why?
Why would he do this? Why would he humiliate me so publicly, so cruelly? The man who had stood at the altar and promised to love and cherish me had looked at me with contempt and told me to go away. My mind started racing, searching for a reason, any reason that could make sense of his actions. Had I done something wrong? Had I offended his mother without realizing it? I went over every interaction I had had with Carol and Susan in the past few weeks. There were the usual backhanded compliments and subtle digs, but nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that would warrant this level of public shunning. Then my thoughts drifted back to the money. The conversation at the kitchen table. His desperation. His relief when I agreed. He had said, "My mom is going to be so happy." Was this what made her happy? Excluding me? Taking my money and then cutting me out of the celebration it had paid for? It was monstrous. It was unthinkable. But the more I considered it, the more a horrifying picture began to form. They did not just want my contribution. They wanted all the credit. They wanted to host this lavish party funded by me and pretend it was all their own doing. My presence would have been an inconvenient reminder of the truth. I was the bank, and once the funds were secured, my services were no longer required. In fact, my presence would have detracted from the story they wanted to tell, the story of the loving son and daughter who threw their parents a magnificent party. The ache in my chest began to morph, hardening into something sharp and hot. Anger.
Pure un dilute danger.
How could I have been so blind? How could I have been so stupid? I had spent 3 years trying to win the approval of these people, bending over backward to please them, sacrificing my own comfort and my own boundaries to keep the peace. And for what? To be used and discarded like a piece of trash. I stood up and began to pace the length of our small living room. The apartment suddenly felt like a cage. I had to do something. I could not just sit here and wait for him to come home, ready to feed me some pathetic excuse. I needed to know the truth. I needed to understand the full scope of his betrayal. My first instinct was to call him, to scream at him over the phone. But I stopped myself. What good would that do? He would just lie. He would gaslight me, tell me I was overreacting, that I had misunderstood. He had already shown me that he was capable of looking me in the eye and saying the cruelest things imaginable. A phone call would be useless. I needed evidence. I needed something concrete that he could not deny. And my mind went, once again, to the money. I had transferred the agreed-upon amount into our joint checking account. That was where the deposit for the restaurant was supposed to have been paid from. I had not looked at the account since. I trusted him to handle it.
Trust.
The word tasted like ash in my mouth. My hands were shaking as I walked over to my laptop on the desk. I opened it up, the bright screen hurting my eyes. I navigated to our bank's website, my fingers fumbling as I typed in the username and password. The page loaded, and I clicked on the link for our joint account. The balance was displayed at the top of the screen. It was shockingly low, far lower than it should have been. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked to view the recent transactions. And there it was. A single, massive charge from the Grandview restaurant. It was dated that very day. The amount was staggering. It was not just the deposit. It was the entire estimated cost of the party for what must have been dozens of guests. It was more than 3 times the amount I had agreed to contribute. It had drained our joint account completely. But that was not the worst of it. The charge had gone through, which meant the money had been in the account to cover it. But our joint account had not had that much money in it. Not even close. I scrolled down the transaction history, my blood running cold. And then I saw it. The transaction that made it all possible. The day before the party, a large sum of money had been transferred into the joint account. The transfer had come from another account. My personal savings account. The account where my grandmother's inheritance was kept. The account that I had explicitly told him was not to be touched. He had not just taken the money I had agreed to give. He had gone behind my back. He had logged into my personal account, an account he only had access to for emergencies, and he had emptied it. He had taken every last cent of my inheritance, every penny of our future house fund, and he had used it to pay for that party. A party he then banned me from attending. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, that I could not even cry. I just sat there, staring at the numbers on the screen. He had not just humiliated me. He had not just excluded me.
He had stolen from me.
He had stolen my future, my security, my grandmother's legacy. And he had done it all with a smile, while telling me how much it would mean to his mother. The shock was gone now. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound. But the anger was a roaring fire. This was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a calculated act of theft and betrayal. He had planned this. He and his family had planned this. They had decided I was nothing more than a source of funds, and once they had what they wanted, I was disposable. Well, they were about to find out just how disposable I thought they were. I was no longer interested in keeping the peace. I was interested in justice. And I was going to get it. My first call was not to Mark. It was not to his mother. It was to my best friend, Jessica. She picked up on the second ring, her voice cheerful.
Hey, Laura.
How was the big anniversary bash? She asked. The sound of her normal, happy voice was enough to break the dam. A single, choked sob escaped my lips. Whoa, what's wrong? Jessica's tone shifted instantly from cheerful to concerned. Laura, are you okay? What happened? I took a shaky breath and told her everything. I started with arriving at the restaurant, the blue dress, the orchid. I told her about Mark's panicked face, his harsh whisper, the way he grabbed my arm. I told her the exact words he used. You're not invited. Go away. I described the look on Carol's and Susan's faces as they watched, their cold satisfaction. And then I told her about the money. I told her about the joint account, the massive charge from the restaurant. And finally, my voice breaking, I told her about my savings account, my inheritance.
Gone.
There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I was afraid she would not believe me, that it sounded too monstrous to be true. Then she spoke, and her voice was filled with a cold fury that matched my own. That is not just betrayal, Laura. That is a crime. He stole from you. I know, I whispered. I'm looking at the bank statement right now. He transferred the money out of my personal savings yesterday morning. And then the restaurant charge went through today. He planned it, she said, her voice low and dangerous. They all planned it. They wanted your money, but they didn't want you.
I am so sorry.
I cannot even imagine how you feel. I don't know what I feel, I said, and it was true. I was hurt, I was angry, but mostly I was just numb. The scale of the deception was too large to fully comprehend.
What do I do, Jess?
What do I do now? Okay, first things first, she said, her voice becoming practical, grounding. Do you have copies of those bank statements?
You need to save them. Print them out.
Take screenshots. Save them to a cloud drive he can't access. You need a paper trail. Her words cut through my days. She was right. I needed proof. I immediately took screenshots of both my savings account and the joint account, saving the images to a secure online storage account that Mark knew nothing about. Then I found the option to download the statements as PDF files and did the same with those. I felt a small sliver of control returning. I was no longer just a victim. I was gathering evidence. Done, I said, my voice a little stronger. Good, Jessica said. Next, you need to protect yourself. Can you go into your personal account and change the password right now? And while you're at it, change the security questions. Make the answers things he would never, ever guess. I had not even thought of that. He still had access. He could potentially go in and try to cover his tracks, though I did not know how. I quickly navigated to the bank's security settings. I changed my password to a long, complicated string of letters, numbers, and symbols. For the security questions, I chose things from my childhood, things that predated Mark entirely. What was the name of your first pet? I typed Sir Reginald Fluffypants, the name of the hamster I had when I was 6. He would never guess that. Okay, password is changed, I told her. He's locked out of my personal account now. What about the joint account, she asked. I don't know if I can do anything about that one without him, I said. We both have to agree to close it. Okay, but you can at least set up alerts, she said. Set up a text alert for every single transaction, no matter how small. That way you'll know immediately if he tries to move any more money around. It was another good idea. I set up the alerts. Now, any activity in that account would come directly to my phone. The feeling of empowerment grew. These were small steps, but they were steps. I was taking back control. Now for the hard part, Jessica said gently. What are you going to do when he comes home? I thought about it. My first impulse was to scream, to throw the bank statements in his face the second he walked through the door. But Jessica's calm, methodical approach made me realize that might not be the best strategy. An emotional outburst would give him an opening to twist the narrative, to call me hysterical, to gaslight me into thinking I was the one in the wrong. He had already tried it at the restaurant, accusing me of making a scene. I can't just pretend everything is okay, I said. No, you can't, she agreed. But you don't have to show him all your cards at once. You have the ultimate proof. He doesn't know that you know. That's your power right now, Laura. You know the whole truth, and he thinks you only know the part where he was a jerk at the restaurant. She was right. He had no idea I had discovered the theft. He would come home expecting a fight about being uninvited to a party. He would be prepared for that argument. He would have his excuses and his justifications ready. He would not be prepared for a confrontation about grand larceny. So, I should just ask him about the dinner? I asked, unsure. Exactly, Jessica said. Be calm. Ask him why he did it. Let him talk. Let him lie. Let him dig himself into a deeper hole. Every lie he tells you is another piece of evidence of his character. Record it if you can. The idea of recording him felt sneaky, but at this point, I was done playing fair. He had stolen my inheritance. All bets were off. I checked my phone. It had a voice memo app. It would be easy enough to start it and leave my phone on the table when he got home. Okay, I said, a cold resolve settling over me. Okay, I can do that. I'll let him lie. And Laura, she added, her voice soft again. You don't have to stay there tonight. You can come here. You can pack a bag and leave before he even gets home. I considered her offer. The thought of being in the same apartment as him, of having to breathe the same air, made my skin crawl. But a different part of me, the part that was now burning with a cold, hard anger, wanted to see his face. I wanted to hear the lies from his own mouth. I needed to face him.
Thank you, Jess.
But I need to do this, I said. I need to see him. I need to hear what he has to say for himself. All right, she said, not pushing. But the offer stands. Call me anytime, day or night. If you need me to come over there, I will be there in 20 minutes. You are not alone in this. I know. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. Her friendship was a lifeline in this swirling vortex of betrayal. We hung up, and I felt a sense of clarity I had not had an hour before. I had a plan. I had my evidence secured. I had a friend who had my back. I was still terrified. I was still heartbroken. But I was no longer a passive victim. I was a woman who had been wronged, and I was about to start fighting back. I looked at the clock. It was almost 10. He would probably be home in an hour or two, flushed with wine and victory, full of his mother's praise. I sat down on the sofa, took a few deep breaths, and waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Every minute that ticked by felt like an hour. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the streetlights outside our window. I did not want to create a cozy, welcoming atmosphere for him. I wanted him to walk into the silence and the darkness and feel, just for a second, that something was wrong. I thought about my grandmother. I pictured her kind face, the way her eyes would crinkle at the corners when she smiled. She had worked her whole life, saving what she could, not for herself, but for me. She wanted to give me a head start, a foundation of security that she had never had. And I had let this man, this stranger who I had once called my husband, steal it. The shame was a bitter pill to swallow. But shame would not get my money back. Shame would not undo the humiliation. Only action would. Around 11:30, I heard his key in the lock. My heart leaped into my throat, pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I took a deep, steadying breath and pressed the record button on my phone's voice memo app, placing it face down on the coffee table. The door opened and he stepped inside, flicking on a light switch. He blinked in the sudden brightness. He was smiling, a self-satisfied little smirk on his face. He was still wearing the new suit. He looked like the cat that had swallowed the canary. Laura, he said, his voice feigning surprise. You're sitting in the dark? Is everything okay? The casualness of his question, the pretense that he had not just committed the most profound act of betrayal of my life, was breathtaking. I looked at him, keeping my face as neutral as possible. Hello, Mark, I said, my voice eerily calm. He took off his jacket and tossed it over a chair. He loosened his tie. He was acting like this was just any other night. Did you eat?
I'm starving.
The food was good, but the portions were so small. You know those fancy places. He was trying to normalize the situation, to steamroll past the events of the evening with mundane chatter. I was not going to let him. I'm not hungry, I said. How was the party? He finally seemed to register my cold tone. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He walked over to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, his back to me. It was great. Really nice. Mom was so happy. She cried during Dad's speech. It was a perfect night. A perfect night. He had the audacity to call it a perfect night. I waited, letting the silence stretch. He took out a bottle of water and finally turned to face me, leaning against the counter. So, he said, taking a sip of water. Are you still upset about earlier? There it was. The opening. He was framing it as me being upset, as if my feelings were an overreaction, a minor inconvenience to his perfect night. Upset, I repeated, my voice still quiet. That's an interesting word for it. I would have chosen humiliated, or perhaps publicly discarded. Why did you do it, Mark? Why did you tell me I wasn't invited? He sighed, a theatrical, put-upon sound. He ran a hand through his hair. He was preparing his performance. Look, Laura, I'm sorry about how it happened. It was last minute. My mom got all stressed out. She decided she just wanted it to be a small, core family thing. You know how she gets. I didn't want to upset her on her big night. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. He was blaming his mother, painting himself as the dutiful son caught in an impossible situation. He was trying to make me feel sorry for him. A small, core family thing, I said, letting the words hang in the air.
I see.
And when was this decision made? Before or after I transferred a substantial amount of money from my inheritance to help pay for this small, core family thing? He flinched. He did not like me bringing up the money. It complicated his narrative of the long-suffering son. That's not fair. The two things aren't related. Your contribution was a gift. A very generous gift, and my parents are incredibly grateful for it. Are they? I asked. They certainly had a funny way of showing it. Watching you throw me out of the restaurant, they seemed quite pleased. You're exaggerating, he said, his voice getting defensive. They didn't throw you out. I was trying to handle a delicate situation quietly. You were the one who was starting to make a scene. I am making a scene. I am being hysterical. I am exaggerating. The classic gaslighter's handbook. I felt a strange sense of detachment watching him perform. It was like watching a bad actor in a play. Now that I knew the truth, the real truth about the theft, his lies were transparent and pathetic. So, you were protecting me from making a scene? I asked. By telling me to go away in the lobby of a restaurant in front of your entire family? That was your plan to handle things quietly? I didn't know what else to do, he said, his voice rising. He was getting frustrated that I was not backing down, that I was not accepting his flimsy excuses. You showed up and I panicked. I knew Mom didn't want you there, and I had to choose. I chose to protect my mother's peace of mind on her 40th wedding anniversary. I would think you, as my wife, would understand that. He tried to turn it back on me again. I was the one who was supposed to understand. I was the one who was supposed to sacrifice my dignity for his mother's comfort. And the new suit, Mark? I asked, my voice still level. Was that part of the plan too? Because I don't remember us budgeting for a new suit for you this month. He looked down at his clothes as if just remembering what he was wearing. My old one was looking shabby. I wanted to look good for my parents. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, I said, when it's bought with money from an account that you told me was for bills. It's a big deal when you're buying new clothes while telling me we have to use my inheritance to pay for your family's party. Oh, here we go, he sneered. It's always about your money, isn't it? Your inheritance. You never let me forget it. He was trying to paint me as a wealthy shrew, holding my inheritance over his head. It was a classic tactic of someone who felt inadequate and was trying to deflect from their own bad behavior. It wasn't my money when you asked for it, was it? I countered. Then it was our family's need. But now that I have a problem with how it was used and how I was treated, it's back to being my money, and I'm the bad guy for even mentioning it. He was cornered, and he knew it. He slammed the water bottle down on the counter. You know what? I'm not having this conversation. I just had a wonderful evening with my family, celebrating a beautiful milestone, and I come home to this. To an interrogation. To you trying to ruin it. I'm not the one who ruined it, Mark, I said, and for the first time, my voice rose slightly. You did. You ruined it when you lied to me. You ruined it when you humiliated me. You ruined it when you treated me like I was nothing. He stared at me, his chest heaving. He had no defense left, so he went for the final, desperate attack. Maybe if you made more of an effort with my family, they would want you around more. Maybe if you weren't so uptight about money all the time, they would see you as part of the family and not just my wife. It was the cruelest thing he could have said because it played on my deepest insecurities. It was the very thing I had been trying to fix for 3 years. I had given up my money precisely to prove that I was not uptight, that I wanted to be part of the family. And he was now using that very sacrifice as a weapon against me. I did not respond. I just looked at him. I let his ugly words hang in the silent apartment. He seemed to realize he had gone too far. His angry expression softened slightly, replaced by a look of weary frustration. Look, he said, his voice softer now.
I'm sorry.
I shouldn't have said that.
I'm tired.
It's been a long day. Can we just go to bed and talk about this in the morning? He wanted a truce. He wanted to press pause on the conflict, hoping that a night's sleep would dull my anger and make me more pliable. He was hoping I would fall back into my old role as the peacemaker. But he did not know who he was talking to anymore. The woman who would have accepted his half-hearted apology and let it go was gone. She had been left behind in that restaurant lobby. No, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. We can't. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation, Mark. I don't think you understand what you have done. I did not mention the stolen money.
Not yet.
I was following Jessica's advice. I was letting him believe this was just about the party. I wanted him to sleep in the bed next to me, thinking the worst was over. I wanted him to believe he had gotten away with it. The real confrontation would come later, when he was least expecting it. And I would be ready. He had no idea what was coming for him. The night was endless. I lay in bed, my back to him, as still as a statue. I could hear his breathing, the slow, steady rhythm of someone who had fallen asleep easily, his conscience apparently clear. Or maybe he was just arrogant enough to believe his lies had worked, that in the morning I would be ready to forgive and forget. The thought made my blood boil. Forgiveness was a currency I no longer dealt in. I was wide awake, my mind a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. The recording of our conversation was saved on my phone. Listening to his lies, his deflections, his cruel accusations had solidified something in me. There was no going back. There was no fixing this. The marriage was over. The only question was how it would end. I would not be the one left with nothing but heartbreak and an empty bank account. The next morning, I woke up before him. I slipped out of bed and went into the living room. I made a cup of coffee, my hand steady now. The fear and shock of the previous night had been burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I had a purpose. I sent a text message to my older brother, David. He was a financial advisor, a meticulous, no-nonsense man who had always been protective of me. I had not wanted to involve my family, to cause them worry, but Jessica was right. This was not just a marital dispute anymore. This was a crime. My text was simple. David, can I call you later this morning? I need some financial advice. It's urgent. His reply came back almost immediately. Of course.
Call me anytime.
Is everything okay? I typed back, not really. I'll explain when I call. I did not want to get into the details over text. Mark eventually woke up. He came into the living room, stretching and yawning, as if it were just another Saturday morning. He saw me on the sofa, coffee in hand, and gave me a tentative smile. Morning, he said. Did you sleep okay? Not really, I replied, my tone flat. I did not look at him. I just stared into my coffee cup. He sighed and sat down in the armchair opposite me. He was trying to gauge my mood. He was deciding which tactic to use today. The apologetic husband? The frustrated victim? Look, Laura, about last night, he began. I was a jerk. I know. I was stressed, and I took it out on you.
I'm really sorry.
It was a better apology than the one from the night before, but it was still hollow. It was the apology of a man trying to manage a problem, not a man who felt genuine remorse for the pain he had caused. I'm glad you think so, I said without emotion. I want to make it up to you, he continued, leaning forward. Let's do something nice today. We can go out for brunch, maybe see a movie. Just the two of us. He was trying to buy my forgiveness with brunch and a movie. He thought my hurt could be soothed with a few mimosas and a romantic comedy. The condescension was staggering. He truly had no idea of the scale of his transgression. He thought this was just a fight. He had no clue it was a war. I don't feel like going out, I said. His face fell. My refusal to play along was throwing him off his script.
Oh.
Okay. Well, we can just stay in and relax. I'll make you breakfast. Mark, I don't want you to make me breakfast, I said, finally looking up at him. I don't want to pretend that everything is okay. It's not. I know it's not okay, he said, his voice laced with frustration. That's why I'm trying to fix it. What do you want from me, Laura? I said I was sorry. I want you to tell me the truth, I said. The real truth. Not the story you made up about your mother getting stressed. I want to know why I was really uninvited from that party. He stared at me, his jaw tight.
He was not expecting this.
He thought his apology would be enough. He thought I would be satisfied with the scapegoat of his mother's anxieties. I already told you, he said through gritted teeth. No, you didn't, I countered. You told me a story. Now I want the truth. Was it your idea, or was it your mother's? He stood up and started pacing. What does it matter? It happened. It's over. Why do you have to keep picking at it? Because it does matter, I said, my voice rising to match his. It matters to me. I need to know who was behind the decision to humiliate me. I need to know if it was my husband or my mother-in-law. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes cold. It was a joint decision.
We talked about it.
We thought it would be better this way.
We.
The word hit me like a physical blow. He and his mother. They had discussed it. They had conspired to exclude me. It was not a last-minute panic, as he had claimed. It was a premeditated act. Better for whom, Mark? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. It certainly wasn't better for me. It was better for the family, he shot back. There's always so much tension when you're around them. You're always so quiet and judgmental. They can't relax. They can't be themselves. We just wanted one night, one special night, where they didn't have to walk on eggshells. The cruelty of his words was staggering. He was twisting my quiet discomfort, my struggle to fit in, into an accusation. He was painting me as the villain, the wet blanket who ruined their fun. All those years I had spent trying to be polite, trying not to say the wrong thing, trying to earn their affection, he had interpreted as judgment. His family's inability to include me was somehow my fault. I was quiet because I was never made to feel welcome, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I was quiet because your mother and sister spent every second I was in their presence making it clear that I did not belong. And you, my husband, you just stood by and let them. That's not true, he yelled. They tried with you. They really did. But you have this wall up. You think you're better than them. Better than them? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Your mother is a manipulative bully, and your sister is her spineless echo. And you are a thief and a liar. So no, Mark, I don't think I'm better than you. I know I am. The word thief hung in the air between us. I had not meant to say it. It had slipped out in the heat of my anger. But now that it was out, I did not regret it. His face went pale. What did you just call me? I stood up, my own anger now fully unleashed. I was done being calm. I was done with strategy. This was it. I called you a thief. Because that's what you are. You didn't just take the money I agreed to give you. You went into my personal bank account, the account with my grandmother's inheritance, and you drained it. You stole my future to pay for a party for the people who despise me. A party you then banned me from. He looked like I had slapped him. He was utterly speechless. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had no lie ready for this. He had not prepared for this. He had underestimated me. He thought I was just the quiet, compliant wife. He never imagined I would have the intelligence or the courage to check the bank accounts. How did you, he stammered. How did I find out? I finished for him, my voice dripping with contempt. Did you think I was that stupid? Did you think I wouldn't notice my entire life savings had vanished? Did you really think you could get away with it? He sank back into the armchair, his face ashen. The fight was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was the pathetic, guilty man underneath. Laura, I was going to pay it back, he whispered. I swear. I was going to get a bonus at work. I was going to put it all back before you even noticed. The lie was so feeble, so transparent, it was almost laughable. You are not, I said, my voice cold. You were never going to pay it back. You were going to let me believe that money was still sitting there, safe and sound, until the day we went to put a down payment on a house. And then what? What was your plan for that day, Mark? What lie were you going to tell me then? He had no answer. He just stared at the floor, the picture of shame. But I felt no pity for him. My pity had been used up and thrown away in a restaurant lobby. I want you to pack a bag, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. And I want you to get out of my apartment. His head snapped up. Your apartment? This is our apartment. No, I said, my voice like ice. The lease is in my name. The security deposit was paid for with my money. This is my home. You're no longer welcome here. You have until the end of the day to get your things and go. I suggest you go to your mother's house. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to have her perfect, generous son back under her roof. He just stared at me, his mouth agape. He was finally beginning to understand. He had not just made a mistake. He had not just had a fight with his wife. He had destroyed his life. And I was the one holding the detonator. He did not move. He just sat there, a stunned, broken look on his face. It was a pathetic sight, but it gave me no satisfaction. I just felt a cold, empty finality. Did you hear me? I said, my voice sharp. Pack your things. He flinched, as if my words were physical blows. Slowly, like a man in a trance, he stood up and walked toward our bedroom. I followed him and stood in the doorway, watching to make sure he did not try to take anything that was not his. I did not trust him anymore. I would not put it past him to pocket my jewelry or some other small valuable on his way out. He pulled a duffel bag from the top of the closet and began to mechanically pull clothes from the drawers and shove them inside. He was not being neat. He was just grabbing handfuls of shirts, socks, underwear, and stuffing them in. He moved like a robot, his face blank. You can't just do this, Laura, he said, his back still to me. His voice was muffled. We're married. We took vows. So did you? I shot back. And you broke every single one of them. You broke them when you lied to me, when you conspired with your mother against me, when you humiliated me, and most of all, when you stole from me. The vows are null and void, Mark. You burned them to the ground yourself. He zipped up the bag and finally turned to face me. There were tears in his eyes. They were the first tears I had seen from him throughout this entire ordeal. But they did not move me. They felt like tears of self-pity, not remorse. He was not crying for what he did to me. He was crying for himself, for the comfortable life he had just lost. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice cracking. I already told you, I said, my arms crossed over my chest. Go to your mother. You chose her over me. You chose her happiness, her comfort, her party over your own wife. So go be with her. I'm sure she will take care of you. After all, you just spent my life savings to make her happy. She owes you. The sarcasm in my voice was thick. He winced. He picked up his duffel bag and his suit jacket from the chair. He walked toward the front door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He paused with his hand on the doorknob and looked back at me. I love you, Laura, he whispered. The words were so obscene, so utterly devoid of meaning coming from his mouth, that I actually laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. No, you don't, I said. You don't know the first thing about love. Love is not theft. Love is not betrayal. Love is not humiliation. I don't know what you feel, Mark, but it isn't love. Now get out. He stared at me for one last moment, his eyes pleading. But he saw no softness in my face. He saw no opening for reconciliation. He saw only a wall of ice. He opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind him. The moment the lock clicked, a wave of something, relief or grief or both, washed over me. My legs felt weak, and I had to lean against the wall for support. I had done it. I had thrown him out. The first and biggest step was taken. But the fight was far from over. He was gone, but my money was still gone with him. I took a deep breath, pushing myself off the wall. I walked back to the living room and picked up my phone. It was time to call my brother. I scrolled to David's contact and pressed the call button. He answered immediately. Laura? What's going on? He asked, his voice tight with concern. David, I said, and despite my resolve, my voice broke. I need your help. Mark stole my inheritance. And for the second time in less than 24 hours, I told the whole sordid story. I told him about the party, the humiliation, and the bank statements. I left nothing out. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, a low, steady sound. He did not interrupt me. He just let me talk until I had gotten it all out. When I was finished, there was a long, heavy silence. "David," I said, suddenly worried. "Are you there?" "I'm here," he said, and his voice was colder than I had ever heard it. It was the voice he used when one of his clients was being defrauded, the voice of a man who was about to go to war. "Laura, I want you to listen to me very carefully.
Do not speak to him again.
Do not answer his calls or his texts. If he shows up at your door, you do not let him in. You call the police. Do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered. "Good," he said. "What he did is called conversion. It is a felony. He accessed your separate, personal property without your authorization and converted it for his own use. The fact that you are married does not matter. That money was your sole and separate property, an inheritance. It is not a marital asset." Hearing the legal terms, the cold, hard facts of the situation, was strangely comforting. This was not just a messy breakup. This was a crime with a name. "What do I do?" I asked. "First, you're going to email me the copies of those bank statements you saved," he said. "The one showing the money in your savings account, the one showing the unauthorized transfer out, the one showing it landing in the joint account, and the one showing the payment to the restaurant. I want the whole chain of evidence. I'm going to forward it to a lawyer I know. She specializes in this sort of thing." A lawyer. The word sent a shiver down my spine. It was all becoming so real. "A lawyer?" I said. "Do I have to sue him?" "You have a few options," David explained, his voice calm and professional. "The first option is to file a police report. This would be the criminal route. He could potentially face jail time. The second option is the civil route, where we sue him for the return of the money plus damages. The third option, and the one that might be fastest, is to use the threat of the first two options to force him and his family to make you whole immediately." The third option sounded the most appealing. I did not necessarily want to see Mark in jail, as satisfying as the thought might be in a moment of anger. What I wanted was my money back. I wanted my future back. "Let's go with a third option for now," I said. "I agree," David said. "It's the cleanest. Here's what's going to happen. I am going to call him. Not as your brother, but as your financial representative. I am going to lay out the facts. I am going to explain to him the legal jeopardy he is in, and I'm going to make him an offer. He and his family have 48 hours to return every single cent he stole, plus an additional sum to cover legal fees and emotional distress. If they do not comply, we will proceed with filing a police report and a civil suit on Monday morning." It was a brilliant plan. It was aggressive. It was decisive. It took the burden of confronting him again off my shoulders. David would be the emotionless, logical force of consequence. Mark would not be able to lie or gaslight his way out of a conversation with my brother. "What if he says no?" I asked, a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. "What if his family doesn't have the money?" "Oh, they have it," David said, a grim certainty in his voice. "They might not have it in liquid cash, but they have assets. They have a house. They will find the money." People like that, people who are obsessed with appearances and their reputation, are terrified of public shame. The threat of having their perfect son arrested for stealing from his wife will be a very powerful motivator. Trust me. I did trust him. I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost brought me to tears. "David, thank you. I don't know what I would do without you." "You're my sister, Laura," he said, his voice softening for the first time. He messed with the wrong family. "Now, send me those statements. And then I want you to lock your door, put on a movie, and order yourself the most expensive takeout you can find. Let me handle this." After I hung up with David, I did exactly as he said. I emailed him the files, my hands moving with a new sense of purpose. Then I double-checked the lock on the door and put the chain on. I felt safer, more secure, than I had in a long time. The apartment, which had felt like a cage just hours before, now felt like a fortress. My fortress. I knew the next 48 hours would be hell. I anticipated a barrage of calls and texts from Mark, from Carol, from Susan. They would try to plead, to threaten, to manipulate. But David had given me a shield. I did not have to engage. I could let him handle it. My only job was to stay strong and not let them get to me. The first call came less than an hour after I spoke to David. It was Mark. I looked at his name on the screen, and my heart hammered. I wanted to answer, to scream at him, but I heard David's voice in my head. Do not speak to him. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text message came through. Laura, please pick up. We need to talk. Your brother just called me. He's insane. So David had already made contact. My brother did not waste any time. A small, grim smile touched my lips. The machine was in motion. Then, another text from Mark. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain everything.
Don't do this, Laura.
Don't destroy our marriage over money. Over money. He still did not get it. He still thought this was about the money. It was about the trust he had shattered, the love he had poisoned, the respect he had trampled on. The money was just the symbol of his betrayal, the weapon he had used to inflict the wound. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number I did not recognize, but it was from the same area code as my in-laws. I ignored it. Then, a text from that number. It was Carol. Laura, this is Carol. Mark is very upset. Your brother called him and said some terrible, untrue things. I think you are having some kind of breakdown, and you need to stop this nonsense right now. We are a family. We do not involve lawyers and police. Call me immediately. Her audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to paint me as the crazy one, the one who was hysterical and needed to be controlled. She called the truth terrible, untrue things. She was doubling down on the lie, trying to bully me back into submission. It was her default setting, but it would not work anymore. I deleted her text without replying. The calls and texts continued for the rest of the day. A mix of pleading from Mark, demanding from Carol, and a single, nasty text from Susan that just said, "You are a gold-digging monster. I hope you're happy." I found that one particularly ironic, coming from the sister of a man who had literally stolen my life savings. I did not respond to any of them. I followed David's advice. I ordered expensive sushi, opened a bottle of wine, and put on my favorite movie. I tried to create a small bubble of peace for myself in the middle of the storm. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach lurched, but I would just look at it, see their names, and then put it back down. Each ignored call felt like a small victory. The next day, Sunday, was more of the same, but with an added layer of desperation. Mark's texts became more frantic. Laura, please. I'll do anything. I'll pay back, I promise. Don't let your brother do this. They're talking about pressing charges. I could lose my job. My life will be ruined. He was not sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. He was scared of the consequences. His pleas for forgiveness were entirely self-serving. There was no mention of the pain he had caused me, the humiliation, the heartbreak. It was all about him. Then came a text that made my blood run cold. It was from a number I did not recognize, but the message was chillingly familiar. It was from a cousin of Mark's, someone I had always thought was decent. Hey Laura, Carol is telling everyone you had a mental breakdown and are making false accusations against Mark. She's hosting a brunch for him today to show their support. The whole family is going to be there. I'm so sorry. I don't believe her, but I wanted you to know what she's doing. They were having a support brunch. For him. They were not just ignoring his crime. They were celebrating him. They were actively participating in a smear campaign against me, painting me as the unstable, vindictive wife. The injustice of it was so profound, so absolute, that it eclipsed everything else. I had been content to let David handle it, to stay behind my locked door and wait for my money to be returned. But this I could not let stand. They were not just going to get away with the theft. They were going to rewrite history and make me the villain. They were going to destroy my reputation while they toasted with mimosas paid for with my stolen money. A new plan began to form in my mind. It was bold.
It was terrifying.
But it was necessary. David's plan was good. It was logical. It was about getting my money back. But it was not enough. I did not just want my money back. I wanted my name back. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the public humiliation they had inflicted on me. The brunch was my stage. The family gathering was my audience. And I had the one thing that could tear their pretty little narrative to shreds. I had the truth. And I had the proof. I looked at the printed bank statements sitting on my coffee table. It was time to stop hiding. It was time for the final confrontation. And this time, it would be on my terms. I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but it was a different kind of pounding than before. It was not fear. It was adrenaline. I called my brother. "David," I said, my voice steady. "Change of plans. The 48-hour deadline is off. I'm going to end this today." And I told him what I was going to do. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his analytical mind. He was weighing the risks, the potential for it to backfire. "Laura, that's a huge risk," he said finally. "A public confrontation could get messy. They could try to shout you down, call you a liar in front of everyone." "Let them," I said, a cold confidence in my voice. "I have the bank statements. I have the recording of Mark admitting he and his mother conspired to exclude me. I have his pathetic, whining voicemails from the last 24 hours. I have proof. All they have are lies. And lies fall apart when you shine a light on them." He was silent for another moment. Then he said, "You're right. But you can't go alone. I'm coming with you." "No," I said firmly. "This is something I have to do myself. This is my fight."
You've done so much already, David.
"You gave me the strength to do this. But I have to be the one to walk in that door. I have to be the one to look them in the eye." He hesitated.
I knew he was worried about me.
"All right," he said finally, his voice full of reluctant respect. "All right, Laura. But you call me the second it's over. And if you need me, I can be there in 15 minutes. "I will," I promised. "Thank you, David. For everything." After we hung up, I got ready. I did not choose an elegant dress this time. I put on a pair of dark jeans, a simple black sweater, and flat boots.
This was not a party.
This was a battle, and I was dressing for it. I put the printed bank statements into a large envelope. I made sure my phone was fully charged. I felt a strange, almost out-of-body calmness. The decision was made. The path was clear. All that was left was to walk it. I knew where Carol lived. I drove there, my hands steady on the steering wheel. As I pulled onto her street, I saw the cars lining the curb. The cousin had been right. The whole family was here. They were all inside, patting Mark on the back, telling him how brave he was, how terrible I was. The thought fueled my resolve. I parked my car a block away and walked to the house. I could hear the murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses from the backyard. I walked up the stone path to the front door and took one last, deep breath. Then I rang the doorbell. A few moments later, the door was opened by Susan. Her face, which had been arranged in a pleasant social smile, collapsed into a mask of shock and disgust when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, trying to block the doorway with her body. "I'm here for the brunch," I said, my voice loud and clear, loud enough for people inside to hear. "I heard you were all gathered to talk about me. I thought I should probably be here for that." I did not wait for her permission. I pushed past her and walked into the house. The entry hall was crowded with relatives, all of whom turned to stare at me. The chatter died down instantly. A wave of silence spread through the house and out into the backyard. It was as if someone had hit a mute button. I saw Carol come rushing in from the kitchen, a plate of mini quiches in her hand. Her face was a thundercloud.
"Laura,
what is the meaning of this? You are not welcome here." "Oh, I know," I said, my voice ringing with false sweetness. I seem to be making a habit of showing up to parties I'm not welcome at. But this one felt too important to miss. Then I saw him.
Mark.
He was standing by the sliding glass door that led to the patio, a mimosa in his hand. He looked like a ghost had just walked into his party. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with terror. He knew. He knew why I was here. I walked past the stunned relatives, my eyes locked on him. I stopped in the middle of the living room, in the center of their circle of support. I was in the lion's den now. Carol recovered from her shock first. Her face hardened, and she put on a performance for the crowd. "Everyone, I apologize," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "My daughter-in-law is not well. She's been under a lot of stress. She's not herself." She was trying to control the narrative, to paint me as mentally unstable in front of everyone. It was a vicious, calculated move. But I was ready for it. "Oh, I'm quite well, Carol," I said, turning to face her. My voice was calm, but it carried through the silent room. In fact, I've never been more clear-headed in my life. "I'm just here to clear up some confusion. You see, I heard you were telling people that I'm making false accusations against your son." I let the words hang in the air. I could see some of the relatives shifting uncomfortably. The cousin who had texted me gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of support. "They're not accusations, Carol," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "They are facts, and I have the receipts." I opened the envelope I was carrying and pulled out the bank statements. I held up the first one. "This," I said, my voice ringing with authority, "is a statement from my personal savings account. The one my grandmother left me. As you can see, 2 days ago it had a very healthy balance. Our down payment for a house." I then held up the second paper. "And this is a transaction record from the very next day. It shows a single transfer out for the entire balance of the account. A transfer I did not authorize." I held up the third paper. "This shows that exact amount being deposited into the joint account I shared with your son. An account that was nearly empty at the time." Finally, I held up the fourth and final piece of paper. "And this is the fun one. This shows a charge from that joint account, just a few hours later, for the full, extravagant price of your anniversary dinner at the Grandview. A dinner that I, the person whose life savings paid for it, was told I was not invited to." A collective gasp went through the room. People were looking from the papers in my hand to Mark, whose face had gone from ashen to a sickly shade of green. They looked at Carol, whose mask of concern was cracking, revealing the furious, cornered woman beneath. "This is a private family matter," Carol snapped, her voice shrill. "You have no right to come into my home and air our dirty laundry." "It stopped being a private matter when you decided to host a public smear campaign against me," I retorted. "And it stopped being a family matter when your son committed a felony. He didn't just borrow money from our joint account, everyone. He stole my separate, personal property, my inheritance. He logged into my private account and cleaned it out without my permission. That is a crime." I turned my attention back to Mark. He was frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. "Isn't that right, Mark? Why don't you tell them? Tell them how you were going to pay it back before I noticed. Tell them how this is all just a misunderstanding." He just stood there, shaking his head slightly, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "And Carol," I said, turning back to my mother-in-law, "let's talk about the decision to uninvite me."
Mark was a little confused about that part.
"First, he told me it was a last-minute decision because you were stressed. But then, when I pressed him, he admitted that you and he talked about it and made a joint decision that it would be better for the family if I wasn't there. Because my presence makes you all walk on eggshells, so tell me, Carol, which lie do you prefer?" Carol's face was beet red. She was sputtering, unable to form a coherent sentence. You are twisting his words. You are a liar." "Am I?" I asked, pulling out my phone. "That's funny, because I have a recording of our entire conversation. Would anyone like to hear it? Would you like to hear your son, in his own words, describe how you both conspired to exclude me after you had secured my money?" That was the final blow. The mention of a recording. It was undeniable. It was a weapon they could not defend against. The room was in an uproar. People were murmuring, looking at Mark and Carol with dawning horror and disgust. Their narrative, their carefully constructed story of the crazy, vindictive wife, and the poor, beleaguered son, had been utterly demolished in the space of 5 minutes. I looked at Mark, who was now being surrounded by his father and a few uncles, all of them asking him if it was true. He could not meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor, a broken man. I looked at Carol. She was staring at me, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred I had never seen before. She was not sorry. She was not ashamed. She was furious that I had won. "I think my work here is done," I said, my voice clear and steady. I put the papers back in the envelope. "Mark, my brother will be in touch with you tomorrow to arrange the return of my money. The full amount. If it is not back in my account by the end of the week, we will be pressing charges. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your brunch." I turned and walked out of the house. I did not look back. I walked past Susan, who was standing by the door with tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. I walked down the stone path, got into my car, and drove away. And as I drove, for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely and utterly free. The aftermath was swift and decisive. David called me the moment I got home. "I'm getting texts from half of your in-laws," he said, a note of awe in his voice. "The cousin who warned you, a few aunts, they are all saying you were incredible. They are horrified at what Mark and Carol did." "It wasn't about being incredible," I said, sinking onto my sofa. I was exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired. The exhaustion that comes after a long, hard-won battle. It was about telling the truth. "Well, it worked," he said. "Mark's father just called me. He was deeply apologetic. He said he had no idea about the money, and he is ashamed of his son and his wife. He asked me for the exact amount, down to the cent. He said it would be wired to your account by tomorrow afternoon." I closed my eyes, a wave of relief, so profound it made me dizzy. It was over. The financial part, at least, was over. I was going to be made whole. "He also said," David continued, "that Mark will be moving out of their house and that Carol is not speaking to anyone. Apparently, the family has completely turned on her. They see her as the mastermind behind the whole thing, who manipulated her son into doing it. It was a fitting end. Carol, who cared so much about appearances, about her status as the respected matriarch, had been publicly exposed as a thief and a manipulator. Her own family had cast her out. She had gotten her wish. She had her perfect, exclusive family party. And it had cost her everything. True to his word, Mark's father had the money transferred the next day. The full amount of my inheritance appeared back in my savings account. I immediately moved it to a new account at a different bank, one that no one but me and David knew about. I filed for divorce the same week. Mark did not contest it. He signed the papers without a word. I heard through the family grapevine that he had lost his job. Someone at the brunch had a connection at his company, and the story of what he had done had gotten back to his boss. He was now unemployed, disgraced, and living in a sad little apartment across town. Susan sent me one final, hateful email calling me a homewrecker and accusing me of destroying her family. I replied with a single sentence, "Your family destroyed itself." I just held up the mirror. I never heard from her again. A few weeks later, I was having dinner with Jessica, celebrating my freedom. "So, what's next for you?" she asked, raising her wine glass. I thought about it for a moment. The future, which had been stolen from me, was now mine again. The down payment for a house was sitting safely in my new bank account. But I was in no rush. "I think I'm going to take some time for myself," I said.
To heal.
To figure out who I am without them. I sold the apartment and found a new place, a small, sunny apartment that was all mine. I filled it with my own things, my own colors, my own style. There were no ghosts there. No bad memories. It was a fresh start. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about them. I would wonder if Mark ever felt true remorse, or if Carol ever understood the depth of her own cruelty. But then I would stop myself. Their fate was no longer my concern. They were characters in a chapter of my life that was now closed. I had learned a hard lesson about trust, about family, and about the quiet strength I never knew I had. They had tried to make me small. They had tried to erase me. But in the end, they had only succeeded in showing me how strong I was. They had taken my money, but I had taken back my life. And that was a victory worth more than any inheritance. They finally learned what it feels like to be powerless. And I had learned, finally, how to stand on my own.